All right, everybody, I am back. Good to be back. And I do want to switch gears, and I do want to talk a little college basketball because it's interesting, right? Like over the last couple weeks, we have talked so much college football, National Signing Day, lead up to the playoff, the actual playoff, some of the other bowl games that I do think, I don't want to say I've neglected college basketball, but I don't think I've gone as deep in college basketball as I can or will over the coming months. But I bring it up because it has really been, frankly, a really crazy about 6-7 day stretch in college basketball, really dating back to last weekend, right? Last weekend, just insanity hits. Duke loses at home to Miami. Kansas loses to Texas Tech. You go into this week, 2 undefeated teams left. USC goes on the road to Stanford. Stanford coming directly off a COVID pause. They weren't even playing well before USC loses. Baylor, final undefeated team, reigning national champ. They're rolling. They lose to Texas Tech, which, oh, by the way, is a credit to Texas Tech. But I bring it up to very simply say what we're seeing now is what I told you about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. I don't believe there is any great or any best team in college basketball right now. I think, and I tweeted this the other night, I think there's about 15 to 18 really good teams, and I do think on any given night, anybody can beat anybody depending on the matchup, right? I don't think there's that much difference between Duke and Villanova, Villanova and Kentucky, Kentucky and, I don't know, Seton Hall and LSU, LSU and Gonzaga. I mean, I could go on and on, but the point is, I think you take the top 16, 18 teams in the country, it's pretty interchangeable. Depends who you're playing, when you're playing them, what time of day, who did they just play, do they have any injuries, do they have any COVID stuff, on and on and on. But what I will also say is this. Well, I don't think there is a best team. I do think there is one team that this week proved that assuming that they win this weekend, they are deserving of the number 1 spot in the next AP poll. And that team, ladies and gentlemen, drum roll please, it is the Auburn Tigers. And for people who don't know, Auburn is in the middle of a phenomenal season, a season that really started during the summer. I had Bruce Pearl on this podcast, I don't know, maybe May or June, right around when his players arrived on campus. And he was really excited about this group. He said he thought they had a chance to do something really special. He said they had the best front court in college basketball, which we're going to get into in a minute. And we're starting to see it right now. And I think the best example, and probably the example that really put Auburn on the national map, was Tuesday night. Kentucky takes care of Vanderbilt early. And then later in the evening on ESPN for all of the world to see, Auburn goes to Coleman Coliseum and beats Alabama. And I know Alabama's not playing great. I've watched every Alabama SEC game. They just lost to Missouri, probably should have lost to Tennessee, could have lost to Florida. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is a vintage Alabama team and this is the best Alabama team that's ever taken the basketball court. They're not very good right now. But when I watch that game, I'll say this, is one, I thought it was a national coming out party for Auburn. I think everybody knew they were good. I don't think they've had a stage quite like this to prove to people that they're deserving. But I also think that game proved that if everything goes well this weekend, they're deserving of the number 1 spot in the country. Let me explain why. First of all, that was a heck of a win. And I know I just said Alabama is not great. Alabama is not vintage as opposed to last year. But at the same time, it is worth noting this is still a rivalry game on the road, a game that Alabama needs to win because they just lost an SEC game. And Auburn goes on the road against your rival and you win. And it wasn't as though it was an easy victory to be had. First of all, what makes Auburn so special, that size up front, they actually lead the country in block shots. Well, guess who got in foul trouble immediately as soon as the game started? Walker Kessler. I don't know if he's their most important player. You could argue it's Jabari Smith. You could argue it's somebody else. But Walker Kessler, North Carolina transfer, one of the top defensive players in all of college basketball, 3.5, almost 4 blocks per game. 2 fouls immediately. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but it felt like a little bit of home cooking, and you're like, oh my goodness, here we go. Alabama's going to win this game. Auburn's going to lose, whatever. Auburn weathers the storm. Auburn plays really well. And then even when Walker Kessler comes back, and he doesn't play very much, he only played 12 minutes. When he comes back, Alabama makes this great run. And you could criticize Alabama for this, you could criticize Alabama for that, but there was a time when Auburn appeared to be running away with the game, and Alabama goes on a great run, and Auburn, like a truly elite team does, like a truly elite team will do in a moment like that, stops, pauses, kind of regroups, recovers, and ends up winning the game. And so when you look at that game in totality with this season and with totality of Baylor losing on Tuesday night, I believe Auburn should be the number one team in the country come Monday if they take care of Ole Miss, and let me explain why. First of all, the record speaks for itself. They are 15-1 overall. The only game that they lost to the UConn Huskies back in November, a game that I watched. I was in Vegas for, frankly, for some college hoops to watch the Gonzaga-UCLA and the Gonzaga-Duke games. But I was at the one of the sports bars. I won't name it because they're not my sponsor, so I'm not giving them any free advertising. I was actually watching with my mom. She's a UConn alum like me. That was a great game. And it went into double overtime. It was the best game of the season. Isaiah Whaley faints at the end, and he was fine, and so I'm not making light of it or anything like that. But it was a war that could have gone either way. Auburn ends up on the wrong side of it, and then they end up coming back and winning their next two games in that tournament. But I bring it up because, first of all, they're 15-1. Their only loss this season was back in November, so a team like Baylor that's taken a loss since then, a team like Gonzaga, blah, 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 whatever. On top of that, they have a really impressive resume. I saw this stat as of Thursday. They are 9-1 in Quad 1 and Quad 2 games. So it's not only that they're winning, but they're 15-1 and beating good teams. Outside of that UConn game, which they ended up losing, obviously the biggest win is LSU. We're going to talk about LSU and Will Wade in a minute. You could criticize Will Wade for a lot, and we're going to talk about it. But LSU's 15-1 right now. Their only loss was to Auburn at Auburn. Auburn took care of Alabama. You could criticize Alabama, say they're not playing very well. This is the same Alabama team that beat Houston when Houston was at full strength. This was the same Alabama team that took care of Gonzaga a few weeks ago. Beyond that, Auburn took care of Syracuse by 20, and I know Syracuse is terrible, but when you beat Syracuse by 20, you're doing something right. They took care of Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago's 12-2 right now. One of their only two losses is to Auburn. The other one was to Michigan State. On and on and on and on and on. Florida, which I know is struggling. My boy Mike White might talk about him as well. But I just bring it up to say, you look at the resume, it's pretty darn impressive from Auburn. On top of that, look at who's ahead of them. Right now, they were number 4 in the country coming into this week. Well, guess what? Number 1 Baylor lost. Well, Auburn should probably be ahead of them. They just lost this week. Baylor, I think, is good, but I don't think they have been playing great by any stretch of the imagination. Beyond that, you know who's number 2 in the country right now? Gonzaga. Gonzaga is currently sitting at 12-2 as I record here. They play Thursday night. I'm not staying up until 11 Eastern to watch the Gonzaga result to see. But let's assume Gonzaga beats BYU at home. I bring it up because I don't think Gonzaga is more deserving than Auburn of the number 1 spot in the country. And you know why? Because Gonzaga, one of their 2 losses was to Alabama in the state of Washington earlier this year. Well, who just beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa? Oh, yeah, the Auburn Tigers. UCLA is currently ranked number 3. I love UCLA. I think they're good. I think they're underrated. They're another team that has a pretty marquee game on Thursday night. They play Oregon. But it's worth noting, even if they win, they're going to be 11-1, and they were on like a 5-week COVID pause where they didn't play many of their marquee games, including a game against Arizona. And so when I look at this Auburn team, I believe they're the number 1 deserving team. They're the team deserving of the number 1 spot in the country. Now the question becomes, are they really the best team in college basketball? I think that's up for debate, right? I said it a minute ago. I don't think there's that much separating the teams, about 18 or 20 or so teams. There are teams that I don't even think people realize are good that are really good, like Xavier, like Providence. Obviously, I mentioned some of the other ones. LSU, Ohio State, Kentucky is ranked 18th in the AP poll. Kentucky ain't the 18th best team in college basketball. I can tell you that much right now. Arizona's really good. USC is really good. UCLA is really good. Purdue is really good. Ohio State is really good. So I don't know if Auburn is the definitive best team in college basketball. But what I will tell you is this. I've heard Jimmy Dykes say this on a few of the recent broadcasts for Auburn, and I agree with him. He had the same concern that I did, which is they're great down low. Best front court in the country. Bruce Pearl, my guy, said it on this podcast in June. Said, I think I have the best front court in college basketball in 2021-2022. The concern that I had, though, was, are their guards good enough? And I didn't really have an answer for that. I didn't really have an answer for that. I thought they were fine. I thought they were talented. I didn't know if they were elite guards that could take over a game the way that in the past Jalen Suggs has been able to do at Gonzaga, whoever. The Baylor guys could do last year, the way some of Villanova's guards could do through the years, the way that a Tyrese Maxey or an Emmanuel Quickley could at Kentucky, the way a Tyler Hero could at Kentucky, the way that some of Duke's guys could. I didn't know if Auburn's guards were that good. What I would say, though, if you watch the game against Alabama, you notice one thing. Auburn has a kid named Wendell Moore who dropped 19 points off the bench and was phenomenal and took over that game for a big stretch. And so I bring it up because I say, look, it's January 14th, okay, 2022. I'm not sitting here saying Auburn is definitively the best team in college basketball. We'll find that out. We'll find out, if there is a definitive best team or if it's one of those weird years where a 2, 3, 4 seed wins the NCAA tournament. But I am telling you this. If Auburn wins on Saturday against Ole Miss, they deserve to be ranked number 1 in the AP poll.